Hey, trust you guys are doing well. My name is Jeff Fuller. You certainly can find this interview and others at J Fuller Interviews on YouTube, the Facebook group, Instagram, and Twitter. Certainly subscribe if you would like. At the bottom of the screen on YouTube, there's a little greater than icon that we would love to have you subscribe and be a part as we try to tell great stories and learn from stories to make our stories much better. And joining us now is one that I've followed for a long time. He has no idea who I am, so just give him props for joining today. This is Adam Bradley. Adam, how are you?
Jeff, I'm doing so good. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, definitely. So I need to back up a little bit. I had a radio show, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. I had this guy come on that represented Gut Athletes. That was his name of his marketing program, business, whatever it was. And he said, "You do not need me. You need Alan Stein." It's like, all right. So Alan came on and he was a strength and conditioning coach for Kevin Durant, among other things. And then from that point, I found the Hardwood Hustle podcast, which you were a co-host of, and now you co-host yourself. And I said, this Adam guy is really cool. And now for all the listeners that know me, they know I'm a pastor. And so I try to weave faith in, not offensively, but just like to get that out there. But I found it pretty cool how you are a Christian working with Alan, who does not profess to be a Christian, but certainly has great morals. His book is excellent. Can you just talk about how you first were introduced to Alan Stein?
Yeah, so prior to the Hardwood Hustle, I had a sports radio show that covered a lot of the sports and athletes here in the Baltimore, Washington market. And we did a lot of profiles on certain individuals, and Alan had certainly raised his profile over the years with the things that he was doing. He was a local guy, and it was suggested to me to reach out to him and do an interview with him. You know, that he'd be a great person to profile and spotlight on the site. So I did, and kind of during that interview process, we started developing a relationship and a friendship. And then I ended up helping him with some stuff technology-wise that he was doing with his company at the time called Stronger Team, and helped him with this. He built an app and a couple websites. And just during that process, I pitched this idea of podcasting to him, right? I said, you get this huge audience. And I had a podcast studio in Gaithersburg at the time. It was 1,000 square foot studio. We've been podcasting, Jeff. Listen, podcasting is a great platform. It has literally turned the corner on its popularity, especially over the last couple of years. We've been podcasting since 2008. I had to tell people when we were getting them to co-host what a podcast even was, right? So Alan's like, "What? Tell me all about it." And I said, "Come to the studio. Let me tell you all about it." And ended up pitching an idea that said, "Hey, you're the coach, right? You're the basketball strength conditioning coach. You know, I was covering the Washington Wizards through my platform, so I've always been a basketball guy. So I thought, I could cover it from a fan perspective, like the leadership perspective, and kind of meshed the two together. And there it was."
It's pretty cool. In podcasting, I know for me, it's been a great outlet. Something else with social media that's really turned the corner of late. Instagram, it's my kids. I'm the old guy now. They're like, "Well, why are you on Facebook? You need to get with Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok." I have no rhythm, so I'll never be on TikTok. But talk to me about how
I think most people on TikTok don't have much rhythm either. So you would join the club.
How have you utilized social media?
I mean, it's been the lifeblood, and it's almost a blessing and a curse. I've had many moments where I've wanted to get away from social, and I've had those conversations. I've read books about minimizing it. I just finished a book called Digital Minimalism, and trying to be more present. But I'm in such a situation you can't, right? So much of our business is tied to one another. It's the platform. It's the foundation of how we get the message out there. And for us, between Lead 'em Up and between Hardwood Hustle, it's been an incredible resource to be able to reach people, to influence people. There's certainly a lot of negative and distractions on those platforms, but I think if you use them correctly in their intended purpose and in line with what you want to get out of it, I think you can actually utilize social media to be one of, if not the greatest asset tool within your company, within your platform.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, talk to me a little bit about Lead 'em Up. I found this pretty cool and just checking it out. But what's your involvement and what can you tell me about Lead 'em Up?
Yeah, so had an opportunity to start Lead 'em Up 5 years ago. Really kind of organically, I was working with I got asked to work with a high school, my former high school, their football team, to really just kind of like serve as like a mentor, some type of leadership coach. It was a very informal role. Gave me a lot of flexibility to kind of create as I wanted to see create, and end up working with this team for the entire year, and loved these kids and just went all in to build the relationships with these young men. And during the course of that season, I was given 45 minutes each week to be with the team, dedicated. They'd hand them over to me. And Jeff, as you can imagine, being a pastor, when you know you're going to have an audience sitting down for 45 to 60 minutes to hear from you, it challenges you to put something together, right? To make sure you're engaging them and moving them. Each week I'd sit there and see different challenges that they had going on within their group and try to figure out the most creative and engaging way to deliver a message that would stick, that they could take with them, they would remember. And during the course of that year, I ended up starting building momentum on this curriculum, which now 5 years later, we're used by almost 1,000 teams around the country. I work with multiple teams each season. We've got regional coaches. We've got some additional curriculum materials that we're building out. We're having conversations about getting our curriculum into school districts. So it's built tremendous momentum. You're in Vermont, correct?
Yeah.
Right? I've had a chance to do a lot of work in Vermont this past year with the VBCA, Vermont Basketball Coaches Association, and working with different schools. And there's a good presence of Lead 'em Up in the Vermont region. So it's been pretty awesome. And it just really came organically just by doing it that first year. And then all of a sudden, the audience, hey, what is it you're doing? Just simple inquiries like that. Hey, what is it you're doing with that team? I see you talk about it every once in a while. Can I get access to some of the things you're doing? And you get enough inquiries and a light bulb goes off, right? That maybe you're onto something, right? Maybe there's value that you can serve in the community through this platform. So that's how it's all played out.
That's pretty amazing. Talk to me a little bit about, where did you get your start? I mean, I just go back to, 2008, whatever you mentioned about the studio for podcasting, working with Alan with the production. Is that something you always enjoyed, or is that something that you had to put in your bag of tricks as you got older?
I got to give a shout out to a guy named Mike Johnson, MJ. So MJ is this tech guru. He is phenomenal. And he's really a pioneer in many ways from a mental perspective, always thinking ahead and very innovative. He actually, in like 2007 or so, started podcasting in this makeshift studio in his house. And he invited me one day to be a guest for a charity golf event that I would host each year. And when I went to his house, he had all these like webcams and these microphones, and they really just did it for fun, and he streamed it online. But it was the first time I'd seen any of it. I mean, talk about 2007.
Right.
I mean, that's really early. And I just looked around and I have an entrepreneurial mind. I have a building type mindset. I'm like, oh, let's take this. Let's build with it. Let's run with it. I'm always thinking really big. So I walked in there just to do the interview, and I'm looking around thinking, okay, this is amazing. This is so cool. Let's do something. And I pitched him on the idea of doing a show for the Washington Redskins, our local football team here. We did that. I got together some friends, and he produced it, and we used his studio. And then over the next couple of years, we ended up building out a podcast network, which those are very popular now. Right. I actually think we were ahead of our time, because I don't think it gained the traction initially, because I don't think people were as familiar. Like Apple hadn't even put the podcast app on the homepage of a phone yet. But we had 9 shows, Jeff. We had corporately sponsored by Buffalo Wild Wings. We signed a deal with the Washington Capitals owner, a guy named Ted Leonsis, and his platform. And we were credentialed at all the different teams professionally here. It was really cool. But then I stepped away from that to really focus on Lead 'em Up and the Hardwood Hustle, as my heart shifted a little bit from just simply covering sports to, trying to impact and serve people and coaches. But that's how I kind of came about. I've always had the desire to grow. I've always had the personality, the talk, the gift to gab, whatever you want to phrase it. That's always been part of me.
So when you were a kid, were you an athlete, or were you one that was trying to make the teams and you just rubbed shoulders with the athletes, or did you just love sports overall? Talk about when you were a kid. What was your introduction to that of sports?
That's a great question, Jeff. I'd say I was actually a really good athlete in my younger days. Okay. So like elementary into middle school, I was, all-star on the baseball teams and, starter on football. But then I hit this like interesting thing my first couple of years of high school where I was really small, right? So like I was average all throughout. Then I wasn't growing for a while. So when I got to high school, I fell far behind. I mean, my high school freshman year, Jeff, I was 5'2", 105 pounds, which is nothing, right? But I played sports all throughout high school, but I was always so small. And it wasn't until my later years I actually started getting bigger. So, I joke maybe I could have played some low-level collegiate sports if my growth spurt had happened while I was in high school, not after I was in high school, because I grew significantly after high school. But I've always been a huge sports fanatic. Always wanted to see how I could, do something in the sports world. And then, when I turned 20 and I ended up kind of turning my life around, getting away from some of the stuff I was doing and ended up following Christ and accepting, Jesus, my heart shifted, right? I became someone who's passionate about people. So Lead 'em Up's really, and the Hardwood Hustle is almost this perfect marriage between two passions of mine. Being around the sports space with athletes and around the competition, but then also being able to serve them from a leadership perspective, from a character development. And although Lead 'em Up is not a quote unquote faith-based program, I think anybody who is faith-based could see the contents of the curriculum and see where it's being inspired from. It's interesting. A lot of people will shut it down if you lead with, hey, this is a faith-based program. They'd say, no, I can't get down with that. You say, okay, it's not a faith-based program, but here's the same content. And they're like, this is phenomenal, right? It's like, okay, nothing changed, but it's this perception. So it's not a faith-based, but it certainly is rooted in the heart and the foundation of who I am. And I'm, certainly not who I am without the Lord and Savior leading my life. So they're connected and married in that way.
Definitely. And I tell this story probably every interview that I have with a Christian on it that is doing something with sports. I had the opportunity to interview Coach Yost. He was the defensive coach, the white coach from the movie Remember the Titans. And he actually spent a year in Vermont at Norwich University as a cadet. But he said he wanted to go into college to become a pastor. Then he realized more kids played football than went to church. And he said he could teach the same principles coaching football without trying to get kids to come to church for an hour once a week. And I just thought that was a great perspective. Next question for you, though, is basketball. What is it about basketball that drew you in, kind of got your laser focus? I'm certainly a basketball junkie, but why basketball over other sports?
Why basketball over other sports? I think I like the culture of basketball. Right, I really do. I like the culture. I think I'm more knowledgeable on football as it relates to X's and O's, just because I did play quarterback and I studied it longer, kind of throughout my childhood. But I like the culture. I like the environment. I think one thing about basketball, at least especially now within Lead 'em Up, it's the perfect sport to teach Lead 'em Up in.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason why now I spend a lot more time with basketball than other sports is because the total group team size of 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 is a great number, right? Where you can have a large number of people to build momentum, but still small enough people to be intimate and get to know them and know their names and their stories and things like that. So, but also from an on-court perspective, I love basketball from a leadership perspective because you truly are reliant on each other. Like you're absolutely reliant in real time at all times, right? Offense plays defense also, right? The same people are on both sides, whereas football, a lot more divided in that regard. You think about collegiate and NFL, like offense and defense, they don't even meet together half the time, right? Offense is on the field while the defense are sitting around in a huddle game planning their own strategies. It's almost like two little teams within one. High school, not as much because they play both sides of the ball, but I just think this unifying, this coming together as one is more important in basketball than maybe any other sport. And I find it so special. But I think also I just like the culture. I think I grew up around the basketball culture a lot more than other sports, playing pickup ball at the neighborhood courts and things like that. It's fun. I just love it.
Yeah, no doubt. One of your previous guests on Hardwood Hustle was a high schooler named Jake, and I thought he had tremendous maturity and insight. Can you just talk about kids these days where it seems as though they have to have more calculated words, but they seem to be really diving into whatever their passion is? Students like Jake, where does that come from? Is it just being around you and being part of Lead 'em Up, or do you think there's something different about this next generation?
Well, I can't take credit for Jake's leadership, right? I can take credit maybe to enhancing a few skill sets within Jake, over the last year or so, and certainly providing some encouragement. But, Jake is the type of player, just using him as an example, his name is Jake Rosen. He just graduated Winston Churchill High School in Maryland. He's going to be attending University of Wisconsin. The interview you alluded to, we had him on to help us get into the mind of a high school athlete. And as you could tell, Jeff, Jake is as sharp of a high schooler you will ever meet, right? Like his vocabulary, his articulation is on point. I think most of that comes from the house, the family, right? Really sharp parents that valued things of education and learning and growing, and providing him inspiration to go and pursue things like a blog at his 8th grade year, right? People will think 8th grade shouldn't be blogging. Are you kidding me? It'll be the best English practice he'll ever get, right? He's podcasting in 8th grade. Talk about the best communication training he'll ever get. I podcast with my 5-year-old right now. We turn on our mics. We interview each other. I will get her thoughts on movies she just watches. We go in the office. We sit down and do podcasts. And I'm going to tell you, she is a phenomenal communicator at age 5. She's already learning it. Okay. It absolutely helps. I think, but Jake, I think sometimes we're given leaders in some cases. Most of the time we build them, and we have to build them. But sometimes we're fortunate to get a guy like Jake, and it just goes to the importance of the parents, right, in the household, valuing certain things. And when you see parents valuing certain things, it's no surprise when the kids value them as well, right? And begin to experience skills generated from those things that have been emphasized during their childhood.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's so important. One question I have for you. I had an English teacher in high school. He said it was the most important class I'd ever take because you learn how to communicate. And sometimes students with great parents, they have all the knowledge, but they just can't communicate. Have you learned how to do so specifically on the podcast to communicate effectively and to get that message out that is received, but also compelling enough to help change people's lifestyles?
Yeah, Jeff, this is where my passion falls, wanting to make sure that I am communicating in a way that sticks. I don't want to just go through the practice of spending an hour with the team. I actually want to make that hour productive and impactful. And I think a lot of times coaches don't think about it in that regard. They just think about what they're trying to get across. They need to firmly place themselves into the shoes of the other people receiving the message and make sure it's being presented in a way that sticks. I go back to 5 years ago when I worked with that team, right? That first time around, this was a new endeavor per se of being presented this opportunity. It was going to make for a long year, Jeff, an extremely long year for me and for them if I couldn't engage them. Think about it. Every time they'd see me walking up to the field, they'd be like, oh, here we go again, right? There's going to be another boring hour. Adam's just going to lecture us or do this or do that. I wanted to avoid that, and I still want to avoid that. So when I sit here, I literally think about these 3 terms, and this is what we say in our curriculum. Everything we teach has to be memorable, portable, and sticky. It's got to be easily remembered, right? It's got to be easily taken with them, and we've got to use concepts and phrases that stick to the hearts of our players. And it goes through this rigid evaluation. Is it memorable? Is it portable? Is it sticky? Does it flow off the tongue? Is it catchy? Right? And if it's not, we need to come back to the drawing board. Give a great example. One of our communication exercises that we've had for many years called Grace and Truth. Grace and Truth, right? we all kind of know what it is. Grace stands for gentleness, respect, love, that type of communication. Truth is just kind of saying it like it is, right? There are some players who don't know anything about speaking with grace, right? All they do is just say it like it is. Man, pick it up, man. You stink, right? All that stuff. They're just truth.
Yeah.
Then there's other people that are really loving and kind and gentle and respectful, but they don't ever actually speak the truth, right? They're too kind, right? We did that exercise for about a year or so, named Grace and Truth, or Truth and Grace, however you want to balance it. Yeah. And we would teach players how to balance the two, right? How to sprinkle in and kind of combine the two. And it was very tangible. I challenged myself constantly, that it wasn't sticky enough, that it wasn't memorable enough. So we've literally for a whole year tried to figure out how can we make this stickier. And we end up flipping it about a year in to sugar and salt. And that's what we've been now for the last couple of years. Same principle, sugar and salt, right? Sugar stands for sugar coating our words with love, gentleness, respect, and kindness, grace, right? All those different things that fall into there. Salt, man, just saying it like it is. But too much salt leaves a bitter taste in one's mouth, right? A sour taste, ooh, that wasn't healthy conversation. You came at me the wrong way. We teach our players how to balance the appropriate amounts of sugar and salt, sticky, memorable, portable. These kids get it. They go through this exercise, Jeff, and they walk through the rest of the season. And they're like, wow, man, you went real heavy with the salt, right? Like when their teammates kind of delivered a message unhealthy, or like, hey, I'll hear this. They're like, man, you could have, hey, next time sprinkle a little sugar on that, right? I feel like you're a little harsh on that, right? Coach will use it. That's a great example of being able to speak in a way that is truly engaging them the way they want. And you go across our entire curriculum, Jeff, I think it's our big differentiator. It's our secret sauce, you could say, as to what makes Lead 'em Up different than any other program out here. Nobody, to my knowledge, teaches leadership in a way that is as memorable, portable, and sticky as we do across the board for young people. And it's so important, right? Who cares? There's a lot of great content out there, Jeff, a lot. But I don't think it sticks.
Right.
I don't know if it sticks. And I don't care how great your content is, if it's not sticking, then it's all for nothing, right? It made you feel good when you spoke it, right? It made the kids feel good that they said they attended it, but nothing actually gained from it. It's got to, and for us, we're constantly fighting that. And I just can't emphasize that enough. I'm fighting that every day. Just, is it sticky enough? Is it memorable enough? Is it portable enough? So,
oh, that's really good. And I know Larry Osborne wrote a book primarily for churches, but called Sticky Teams, and it talks about those connection pieces. I love that sugar and salt. I think that speaks extremely well. And also this picture behind me, it looks as though you and Alan are kind of getting into it. In our culture and society today, in our nation, it seems as though people think the loudest voice is going to win, which I disagree with. When we're attacking, or I would say attacking the fact that racism happens, when we're attacking the things of social injustice, what's the best way to be heard?
Wow. Well, I think the best way to be heard first is by listening in a very counterintuitive way. It doesn't seem to make sense, but when you're listening, you're expressing a humility, right? That you may not know it all, that you're trying to learn, trying to absorb. I think when you listen also, and you come from that place of let me absorb the information, I think it also then adds more authority to your voice when you then come back around to actually speak, right? You've done the time to listen, you've absorbed. I think we all want to jump right into a conversation. We all want to jump right into our points and just start hammering it down people's throats from the moment you begin the conversation. And that immediately creates some defensiveness, right? It immediately creates some tension. Like, hey, this person's trying to put their views and feed them to me and convince me on that. And I think, at least for me, it's been a ton of listening. And it's also been, I've done this little exercise in my own head, right? I try to pretend I'm not hearing from the person who's speaking. That I try to pretend I'm just hearing it for the contents of the content, right? Yeah. Or the context of the content, or however you want to phrase it. We literally, James Clear, he's a great blogger, author of Atomic Habits. You may have read it or familiar with him.
Yeah.
He wrote a blog post, which was so good. I've referenced this so many times over the last year or so since I read it. Why Facts Don't Change People's Minds was the title of the blog. Have you read that, Jeff?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Why Facts Don't Change People's Minds. And in there, he simply said, and it's so true, that it's because it's no longer about facts, it's about identity.
Yeah.
It's about your classification. That if I were to agree with someone that's in a opposing views class, I'm now potentially uprooting myself out of my identity, right? Because let's say I'm a Democrat and I'm blue and I'm left, as far left as you can get, right? Well, if I believe and agree with a far right Republican, I'm essentially disrupting my identity.
Right.
And in my identity are my friends, are my circle, how people know me, who I am. So simply agreeing with your fact, it's not about agreeing with your fact. I'm not comfortable disrupting who I am over it, right? And changing maybe my friends and how people view me. And that it's so much deeper than that. And that is such a big issue right now when we talk about some of these big topics within social justice and racism. It is a little frustrating that some of these topics have gotten so big that it's created what shouldn't be a divisive issue of Black Lives Matter, but it has actually created division within it, right? Because there's some polarizing topics surrounding it. One prayer that I have is that I can ignore some of the noise and distraction that would maybe distract me from the heart of the issue of loving people, Black people specifically, the way we're supposed to love all people. But I found it interesting, this class. I was listening to a panel last night on YouTube, the Revolt Summit presented by AT&T. There was about 6 speakers from all different, 6 Black speakers, half men, half women. Some are, one woman was a Trump supporter. Actually, 2 of the women were Trump supporters. They had a whole, they had everybody from every perspective, okay? Found it crazy. There was one point, the Trump supporter, the woman, started laying out some facts and some data and stats, and the crowd was very animated that night. They were passionate. It was a large audience, right? And they were speaking their minds and yelling up. That moderator had to kind of calm them down at different times throughout the interview, Jeff. And as she's saying some of the things she's saying, they're booing her, okay? Like, oh, no, baby, like just murmurs and stuff like that. Then one of the, you could say the gentleman that's on the left, right? That was a big fan of the room, okay? He steps in and he shuts the crowd down, one, for being disrespectful, right? For not listening to even opposing viewpoints. But then he goes and actually supports and says, no, what she is saying is true. And he goes on this 2 or 3 minute kind of tangent about how she's actually right on those things that she just shared. And they celebrated him.
Yeah.
They booed her and they celebrated him, and the content was the exact same. And I think that's a huge, huge issue, right? Because I think when we're talking about some of this stuff, as emotionally charged as these topics are, we've got to figure out how to have some of these conversations and dialogue in a soberly mental perspective where we can be clear, where we can just really think things for what they are, the facts, and really view it from a very pragmatic perspective, with a very realistic perspective, and suppress the emotion to some degree. Emotion is great. I always say, and this actually came from Alan, right? Play with emotion, but not emotional.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Play with emotion, right? High energy. But the moment you become emotional, you actually get off your game.
Yeah.
Right? You're out of your mind. In the sense of you're not as sharp as you could be if you just played with controlled emotion. Right? And I think a lot of that's going on. There's so much emotional reactions that it's actually not allowing us to kind of respond and understand and listen with just the proper emotion. So for me, I think, how do we approach it? I think coming in with a humble heart of listening first, being very fair, right? Suppressing the emotional side to the level where that allows us to listen correctly.
No, that's so good. And I just think of a few things. I actually watched that interview, believe it or not. This was 2 days ago, and it was just fascinating how I would say people are selfish and they want their identity to be affirmed. And when somebody comes against it, it's more a personal attack. And when we try to get better, we have to understand we need to evolve in that sense as well. Somebody I love to listen to is Doug Gottlieb. I think he has a good perspective on a lot of things. He shared that growing up just playing basketball, the racial dynamic wasn't there. It was just more he showed up with a bunch of dudes to play basketball and they knew the common goal was to win. What is it about sports that can be a unifying factor if we would allow it to do its job?
Yeah, man, I think when we all put on a jersey, we're all on the same team, right? And it really is a microcosm of how our world should work, right? All of us coming together, doing their job, doing your job, right? But doing it in a way that you've got to own your responsibility, but also try to lift up those around you, all working towards the same goal. Think if society worked the same way, that all of us were on the same team. We all had to do our job while simultaneously trying to lift up other people, all to work towards the same goal. Wow, that would be incredible. It seems so far from where we are as a society right now. But in sport, the interesting dynamic, though, Jeff, it only works that way.
Right.
That's the thing, right? If there's division, it doesn't work. It only works when you're unified, when you do your job and you're lifting up others to work towards the bigger goal. So for me, it's what we should aspire to be. It's part of the reason why I love teams. Teams can provide tremendous joy. They can also provide tremendous frustration, but it all depends on how we choose to build it. And I think if we build them correctly, right, skin color, these different types of things don't matter, right? It's all of us together working towards the same goal. And, you know, the part about lifting up others is so important also. And it's one that I challenge our players with, because nobody has to teach our players how to get theirs, right? Or to be selfish, right? That's something that we're just we always say, at least in the faith-based community, you know, we're all born with a selfish nature, right? Mine. My 2-year-old, you know, doesn't know a lot of words, but she knows mine, right? Like she knows that one. It's like, where did she learn that one so passionately? Like there's a part of us that's just who we are, right? But, you know, I love challenging the competitive nature of players and connecting it to their leadership. And I'll challenge some star players on my teams that maybe I don't think are activating their leadership role to the level that I want to, or the level that I think that they could get to, or the level that I know their influence could get, you know, could be at, right? They're very influential. And I'll challenge it and say, man, I just don't think you really want it. What you mean, coach? I want it. I just don't think you really want it. Yeah. Well, man, you see the work I'm putting in. I'm like, I don't think you really want it. I'm like, why you say that, coach? Because you do nothing to lift and raise the level of the other guys around you. When you know you can't do it on your own. So if you really wanted it, you would go out of your way to raise the level of those other 4, 5, 6, 10 players and get them to another level. And you would know if you could get them to another level, your game would go to another level. Your spotlight would be brighter, right? And you do nothing. You don't hold them accountable. You don't challenge them the way. You don't give them some of your innate skills and knowledge of the game. You don't share that from a mentoring role. I just don't think you want it. And boy, that gets them, Jeff. Yeah. It gets them. It challenges them. Listen, I'll think you want it when I see those things happen, right? But until that, I don't think you really want it. And, you know, I think just kind of going back to the team, you can have that conversation with a white player, a black player, a Spanish player, an Asian player. It doesn't matter, right? It's like, hey, you've got a team. It doesn't matter what their skin colors or anything. If you want to make this work, you better work together. You better go out of your way. It's not all about you. We've got to come together. You either want it or you don't.
Well, that's, I think, the importance of confronting in love, or speaking the truth in love. And that's going to be received. That's the sugar and the salt. Exactly. That's a fact. Hey, so I'll get you out quick. And thanks, Adam, for making the time. It's a pleasure to meet you and to have you on and just sharing some thoughts. This is probably the gotcha question, I guess. Sometimes my interviews are pretty fluffy because I just want people to like me so they can come back again. But you said you're down in the Washington Redskins area. What are your thoughts on their name?
Oh man, the big topic of the day down here. I think I'll be honest with you. I don't know enough about the heritage of the dynamics of the Redskins and how Native Americans view that term and everything. I'll be honest with you. I haven't studied it to that level. I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that if there are people that are offended by it, that we need to listen to them. I don't think we immediately need to jump the moment someone says I'm offended by something. I think we really do need to take a very practical. At the end of the day, I could say, Jeff, I'm offended. I could probably have named 5 things I'm offended, right? From you. If you really wanted to get to that point, people can get to the point where they can find offenses in anything. So it's hard for me to say. I do think at this point, the conversation is not going away. I think if there was ever a time to do it, now would be the time. So I think if it were to happen and if it should happen, let's do it now. I've got a nomination of the name, I think, right? I tweeted that yesterday.
Okay.
The Washington Pigskins.
There you go.
Okay. Now, why did I say that? Why that name? I think a couple things, right? I think 3 things. Pigskin is a football, right? We refer to that, as a football. So there's that connection. We already called the Redskins the Skins. So you could just keep that, right? And just have the Skins moniker. And then we've obviously had the unofficial mascot over the years of the Hogs, the pig, right? Yeah. Right. So like the pigs, the Hogs, you could do a lot of branding from that. So that was my nomination. We'll see what happens. But I think now's probably the appropriate time. I personally, I can tell you from a fan, I think initially I'm like, no, I don't want to get rid of that. Now I'm just like.
Yeah. When you gauge the temperature and culture of what's taking place, this would be the time if there's ever a time. So with the Pigskins, would you get any royalties because you tweeted that first, or is that something that you're hoping for?
Well, not really, actually. I don't think I would even ask for the royalties, because, well, first of all, I was like, oh, I'd want tickets, right? Maybe I could leverage some tickets, but I'd rather watch from home these days than go to games. I haven't been to – I'd maybe go to 1 game a year. It went from 6 years ago where we were broadcasting in the parking lots, before games. Now I got kids and life is just so busy. I'd rather sit around and hang out and not have to spend the whole day doing it. So I'll let them have it. I don't need the credit.
Oh, for sure. I'll give you credit if that means anything. But Adam, hey, thank you so much for making the time. I love your perspective. It's awesome what you're doing with Lead 'em Up. And I just am so grateful for that creativity, but the stickiness of sugar and salt. I think that's something I'm going to be taking with me personally
Jeff,
for a long time.
25, 30 more of those sticky phrases that would change your life, Jeff. That's what we do. That's how we teach it. Before we go, can I give a shout out to my guy, Coach Dan at U32?
Yeah.
U32 head boys basketball coach, Mr. Vermont, in my opinion. He's the one who's helped connect me to a lot of what's going on in Vermont. And I know he endorsed you as well. He sent me a text about jumping on the show, Jeff.
Sweet. So, Dan's a good guy. Hey, Adam, thank you so much. Wish you all the best. Enjoy your family and happy 4th. Enjoy this long weekend as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it so much. Best of luck.
And again, that's Adam Bradley. Making some time. You can follow him on Instagram and certainly check out Lead 'em Up. That's all I got for you today. And we'll be back with some other great interviews coming up shortly. So take care. Enjoy the 4th and be well. Sugar and salt. Practice it.